Hi, good morning, everyone. We'll wait just one more minute for lost people to join, and then we'll start. I hope everyone can hear me. If not, you can type in the chat. All right, we'll start. First of all, thanks for all joining this webinar about why your media plan is failing and what to replace it with. We'll go to the presentation. If there are questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Um, But before we kick off, I'll quickly introduce myself. So I'm Eli, or Eli, head of media at IO. So I'm a part of IO for 10 years now. My responsibility is the media part in IO Belgium and the media strategies for different clients. And what I'm going to present to you today is our vision on how a shift in media is needed. What we'll cover today is, first of all, we're going to set the stage a bit, why marketing and media, the way we are doing it now, isn't sufficient anymore. And there's a need of a mind shift, and we need to ask ourselves the right questions. And afterwards, we'll go to our belief and the influence system, so the system in which we want to work now, going to comparing campaigns versus systems. Of course, it's important to organize your teams to make this work. Of course, to go to one growth engine, one system, and one story. So first, setting the stage a bit. What we often see is at the moment there's a gap. There's a gap of what media plans and campaign KPIs tell you. What they tell you is often the results of the campaigns after it happened, but there's a gap with what the real impact is for your business. And why do these results occur? Are we drawing the right conclusions, and so on and so on? So what a media plan tells you is not always the impact on your business. Now, to kick things off, I'd like to have a little interaction, so you can just raise your virtual hand in a few minutes. So I'll ask you a few questions to see if you have the same feeling. So you can raise your hand if you're still explaining campaign performance based on reach, clicks, and impressions. All right. Now, why are we still doing this? So we're still uh, judging our media plans based on these metrics because it's easier. We all do it. I do it too. But metrics like impressions and clicks, they explain exposure and they're easy to understand. That's why we do these kind of things. But when we do this, there's a lot of dangerous assumptions that creep in. We tend to make sure that reach becomes relevance, impressions become at recall, clicks become interest, and CPM and CPC is our metric for effectiveness. But that's unfortunately not always right. Reach isn't relevance, impressions isn't at recall, and so on. And by doing that, we will make sure that we draw the wrong conclusions and optimize. So, yes, it's easier, but easier isn't sufficient anymore. Exposure isn't about attention. More impressions don't equal more impact. And it definitely does not confirm what your customer wants to see. It just tells you, is an ad shown, yes or no? And that's a bit the problem. Our customers and we too, we see thousands ads a day. So visibility has become abundant, but meaningful attention has become very scarce. It's very difficult to stand out from everyone else. And that's the shift we need. We need to start focusing on meaningful attention and stop just on visibility. The second thing that I wanted to discuss with you is, are you still building your media plans for moments and funnels? What we see a lot is that media plans are created in different frameworks, whether it's awareness, consideration, conversion, seeding, do, and so on. And often a media plan is created just for one moment, a month, or 2 months, or 3 months, but it's not always on. And that's also something that needs to change. Why are we doing this? Because again, media plans make it easy to show activity. They provide a clear oversight of what we're doing. And I'm not saying that it's wrong, but it's not what we want. It's also, if you report on it afterwards, it tells you what it has done afterwards, but not the real impact. So there's two problems. Building campaigns for moments is a problem because it doesn't explain influence. Media plans are a moment evaluating a moment after it happened, but behavior changes faster than you can change budgets. We'll come to that later, but a customer journey is quite complex. People are changing, and we need to start uh, start changing the way we work based on that. So working in moments doesn't explain influence on your brand. The second problem is the funnel. A funnel is a really linear journey, but if we look at the current customer journeys that a customer of yours has, the customer journey has become very messy. The behavior of customers isn't linear. It doesn't go from awareness to consideration conversion, but they drift in and out of different phases. Every customer has a different journey, and so on and so on. So building media plans in funnels isn't sufficient anymore if you want to convince your customer to start buying from you. And the reason why is this. What we see in the last 10 years is that there's 60% more touch points available to our customers. And we see that customers use between 6 and 10 touch points before they start purchasing. Then there's the second problem with this. It's AI. AI compresses the journeys. It also makes them 33% shorter, but also it makes sure that a lot of purchases happen between 30 minutes. So on the one hand, we have a lot more touch points that are important and our customers are using. And on the other hand, we get less chance of convincing our customer because AI makes it shorter. The last important part of setting the stage is this one. We see it a lot with different customers, with ourselves. A lot of people are struggling to drive the same or better performance from their campaigns with equal budget or even with more budget. Now, that is normal. That's not something that is specific to certain businesses, to certain people, but that's normal. The reason because it's normal is that the market is getting more expensive every year. Market is getting more expensive, but your media budgets, of course, are limited. You can't keep raising your media budgets. You have to take into account what you have. If we look in general, in Europe, we see 4 to 5% inflation in terms of media costs. And the main reasons for that is competition is rising. There's a lot more competitors in the market advertising. Tech costs are rising, and we use more and more data, which increases tech costs, and that's normal because we want to be more relevant, but it makes it a bit more expensive. And the third reason is industry consolidation. Think of Meta, Amazon, Alphabet. They already have 56% of the ad spend. And of course, that makes it for us more expensive. Now, the reason that's something um, uh, we can go against. It's normal. We have to go with it, but we need to stop over optimizing for efficiency. What most businesses do is they try and solve these problems by over optimizing their paid media. But the solution in gaining better results is not by over optimizing your campaigns or just pushing more budget. That doesn't work anymore. Because if you start over optimizing your campaigns, you draw the wrong conclusions. You might say, okay, this campaign isn't working anymore. I'm going to pause it. I'm going to delete it. But it might be a shame because, yes, that campaign in direct results, maybe in terms of impressions, clicks, doesn't work the way you want it to, but it might still have influence on your business. So over optimizing your campaigns isn't the way to go and can lead to wrong conclusions. Unfortunately, thank God, so to speak, there are two solutions. We have two levers that we can put into place for this. On the one hand, is what we are doing now is that we use channels in isolation, and that's something we really need to stop doing. Because if we see that in terms of brand impact, yes, 25% of brand impact comes from paid channels, but 75% of the impact comes from own channels. So we need to stop looking at paid media in isolation. We need to shift to a system where we also take into account owned media. Again, there's a lot more touch points. We need to take into account that a lot of these touch points are also owned and earned touch points. Second part is, as I said before, people drift in and out of in markets. Sometimes they're in market, sometimes they're out of market, but every touch point a customer has with your brand is important because purchase decisions are for 70, between 70 and 84% driven by brand bias. So we need to make sure that the brand interactions that customers have with your brand are really, really uh, good. So when they are ready for a decision, they decide to purchase from you. So two levers, instead of over optimizing, start looking at your campaigns in terms of paid, owned, and earned, and really make sure that your brand interaction in every touch point is good. And that's why we need to stop doing campaigns for moments and in funnels, but we need to start designing a system where paid, owned, and earned are integrated in one ecosystem and where interactions of all of those touch points become the lever on your performance. Because over optimizing doesn't work anymore, but designing a system can leverage your performance. So that's a bit setting the stage. These are a lot of problems that we see with a lot of clients and in the market. So there's a mindset shift needed um, to keep growing that performance in the current media world. As I said, buyers don't move in straight lines. They drift in and out of markets, and they're in market for a short time, they go out of market again, and we can't control that journey anymore. And there's a lot of customers that are using different journeys to come to their purchase, and it's something we can't control anymore. We can't control now a person is in the awareness phase, now it's in the conversion phase. We need to be present on all different touch points to make sure that we have the right interaction and the right influence on that people. And it's not only paid. So every interaction shapes the next one. A brand impression today can influence a purchase tomorrow. And touch points are not independent anymore. They compound. And on all of those touch points, a brand experience needs to be right. Last but not least, in-market volume is limited. You can't just keep growing in-market volume by raising budgets or more optimization. We need to leverage that brand and these other touch points to make sure that the out-of-market volume transfers into in-market. So one of those levers I just talked about is the brand. The brand expands the market and the performance captures it. Now, brand isn't, to clarify, brand isn't only about brand campaigns, big campaigns with big budgets, but it's creating mental availability and memory, shaping perception and preferences by making sure that every touch point a customer has, whether it's a brand campaign or an owned campaign, every interaction needs to be good and on brand. Because if you get that right, every touchpoint interaction a customer has, make sure that your in-market and your performance grows. So brand expands the market, performance captures it. It's really two levers to make sure your performance keeps growing. If you only keep focusing on performance, your performance will plateau, and then, of course, there's a limit. So there's three shifts needed. One shift is we need to shift away from impressions and clicks. Yes, they are important, but we need to start evaluating our media on attention and impact. As I said, visibility is abundant, but meaningful attention should be our focus. Second shift is we need to start designing systems over campaigns. Campaigns are a result from systems, but to make campaigns work good, we need a system where we orchestrate touch points across paid, owned, and earned instead of all of those things in isolation. And the last shift we need is we need to stop optimizing, certainly over optimizing, but we need to make sure that we take influence over optimization. Influence is built by bringing brand and our paid, owned, and earned channels together with brand as that lever on our performance instead of just squeezing the last drops out of our performance. So also the way we need to ask ourselves questions if something is working, that also needs to change. And we no longer have to say, did this campaign perform well? Because it might have and it might not have. But we need to start asking ourselves the questions, did media strengthen our strategic choices? Did our market share grow because of what we're doing? Are we building sustainable influence instead of just temporary campaigns and output? These are different kind of questions, but the answer to those questions tell you more about the impact on your business instead of, did this campaign work? Yes or no? So that's a bit the mindset shift that we need to take instead of keep doing what we're doing. So that brings us to our belief, and we believe that everyone needs to take this into account. Instead of doing what we're doing, start bringing one brand story, one brand experience to your in-market, but also your out-of-market customers, and start doing that across all of your touch points. Not certain touch points in isolation, but all of them. Because we can't control the journey anymore. We can't control our customers in what touch points they use and they don't use. So we need to take into account everything if we want to keep improving our performance. So performance really emerges from interaction between touch points, between brand and performance. So we can continuously build that demand, nudge people to take decisions and connect with our buyers. So instead of campaigns, let's start building influence systems. Instead of separating budgets between brand and performance, let's consider them two levers in one system. Instead of just building media plans and channel mixes, Let's build an infrastructure of meaning. And instead of just evaluating campaign activity, let's work in a continuous loop and always on adjust our touch points, the way we work with them, the way our brand is leveraged in all of them. So instead of just for moments, let's do it always on in a system. So that's the belief we have. And that comes to our influence system. So the influence system is stop running campaigns and designing systems. And start with what you saw on the first slide, build, nudge, connect, is our system. Building is about defining the meaning and direction. So it's about the objectives you have for your business. It's about the audience, your customers that you want to reach. It's about your brand. And a brand is, of course, the messaging. And what do we want to tell them? Because with that build phase, you can start building demand before it's in market. You can create memory and mental availability with your customers. And that shapes how all of the other touch points that your customer has with you are interpreted. If those interactions are not good, the performance will also be bad. So in the build phase, you really need to translate your brand into all of the signals across your system. If you have a clear view on that, you can start orchestrating those touch points. And that's what we call nudge and connect. So we need to activate your brand across touch points, as I said, paid, owned, earned, shared, and anything else that comes into play. Nudging is really about nudging the right decisions with your customers. Connecting is about really connecting with your brand to make sure that when they're ready to act, they convert. So this phase is also really about turning that messaging that you want to do to your customers into attention. And that's by choosing the right formats, choosing the right call to actions, and so on and so on. And again, across all the relevant channels, and every channel has their own formats, their own requirements, and that's what you need to take into account, because if you do that right, you are shifting from impressions to attention. The last part in our system is, of course, learning and optimizing, and we need to improve our system over time. As I said before, you can optimize campaigns, but you can never shift budgets in the same way or at the same speed as your customers' behavior change. So the way we optimize also needs to shift. We need to ask ourselves the right questions. As I said before, not just is this campaign working, but is our market share or our search share on our brand, is it rising, yes or no? We'll deep dive a bit more in the optimization part later, but this is designing a system instead of just campaigns for moments in funnels. So to summarize, our system is we don't optimize channels anymore, but we design a way how they should work together. So the question we get a lot is, are campaigns dead if we present this? No, they're not dead. But it's another way of thinking. Campaigns are still relevant, but they are a result of a system. First, you need to design a good system. And if you have a good system where you can orchestrate all your touch points, you of course still do campaigns throughout the year. But if you don't have a good system, your campaign won't work. To make that a bit more tangible for you, we compare the different flows. So we have a campaign flow and a system flow. If we look at the duration, campaign flows have a fixed start and end date. A system is always on and adaptive. So that's already the main difference. But in a campaign, we'd also always do channel first thinking. instead of seeing media, creative, data, technology as one system. Channel first thinking is sometimes an issue because we start thinking from a channel instead of what does our audience want to see, what does it need to see, what's the message that we need to tell them. And that should come first before deciding we have to do this channel. In campaigns, if we talk about creatives, creatives are very static. We think about this is the messaging that we do, we translate that into awareness, consideration, conversion, but it's all very, very static throughout that campaign. Sometimes we change assets a bit, but what a system does is it just thinks about, okay, what's my brand, what's the messaging and my audience, and what do I want to tell on what touch point, in what way, and so on and so on. So it's more modular and it can be scaled across different channels. Of course, the one I already mentioned a lot was type of channels. Campaigns, we tend to always think in terms of paid touch points. The system thinks in paid, owned, and earned. And the big part, of course, is also still optimization. If we do campaigns, our optimization happens late after it happened, or it never happens. We make a reporting, we draw conclusions, and then maybe in the campaign for the next year, we use those learnings. But in a system, it's all very continuous. Of course, it's also AI powered, but we'll zoom in on that a bit later. Measurement, also very important. Campaigns are about short-term exposure and clicks. They also tend to start with assumptions. If we design a system, we start to measure behavioral change and the influence it has on your brand. Not only did I receive an impression, was there a click to the website, and so on. So the result is also quite big. In a campaign, there's fragmented impact and there's slow learning because it's just one moment. You have impact for that moment, but you don't build influence. If you start doing continuous optimization, always on campaigning across touch points, that really compounds brand impact and media efficiency, and it starts building your brand and influences the behavior of your customer much more than just one moment in the year where you do campaigning. So that's a bit the different way of thinking that you have to start doing. So what we talked about now was more and why the shift is needed, what the mind shift is, and how a system works compared to campaigns. That's a mindset shift, but that also requires you to organize your teams and the way you work. And that's what I want to discuss with you now. It's about team structure, it's about reporting, it's about optimization, and I will also deep dive a bit into data and AI, how that can help. So your teams, they should be organized. You should start building a governance framework. And if you look on the left side of the screen, it's more about the experts and the teams. So what you really need is a cockpit team. A cockpit team are the people that are responsible for the strategic direction. Is the quality good? Is the brand represented everywhere? Are we collaborating with other partners in our ecosystem? So these people are really important to governance the more strategic direction. Then, of course, you need a dedicated core team, which is a fixed team of different experts that work together on delivering day-to-day optimizations, setting up campaigns, reportings, and so on and so on. And then a very vital part is, and that's what most businesses and people forget, are the plugin experts. As I mentioned multiple times, system thinking isn't only about paid, it's also about owned, it's about earned. And you need to be flexible in what are the kind of touch points that I need to invest time in now. And then you need plugin experts that you can bring in once it's needed. If you need an automation expert, you need to be able to have one to make sure that you address that touch point in the right way. So cockpit team for strategy, core team for the operational level, and plugin experts to make you flexible and really make that system work. On the other side, there's other important parts. You have an optimization rhythm, and the way we optimize should change a bit. A reporting rhythm, because it's important to drive the right conclusions. And of course, data and AI is important, and it can help you a lot to drive the right insights and to change your strategic direction. And now I'll deep dive with you in these different rhythms. If we look at reporting, what a lot of people are doing now is the campaign reporting. What should we optimize in active campaigns? It's all about tactical levers. Are we using the right landing page, the right placements? How is search ranking going? Is the CTR and the CPC good? Things like that. And yes, that's still important to get the most out of your campaigns. But as I said before, you don't need to over optimize your campaigns. It's not because click-through rate isn't fully your benchmark that the campaign doesn't have impact or influences the behavior of your customer. So we also need to start do more system reporting. System reporting is more about the performance of your audience. How are they performing? How are the different formats performing against each other? And to make a very easy example, videos versus images, what works best. But here it's also quite important to start evaluating your messaging, because if you evaluate audience formats and messaging, that tells you, are we translating our brand values in the right way across our touch points? Of course, and that's what I said before, you can ask yourself other questions here, like, is my market share growing? Is the share of search in branded rising or not? So these are already different questions, more to optimize your system instead of just those campaigns. And then, of course, business reporting. Is our marketing driving revenue? Is it improving efficiency? That's more about what's the win rate, what's the basket size, what's the revenue, and things like that. So there are a lot of different types of reporting that need to be put in place to make this work. Campaign reporting is more for the dedicated core team and the plugin experts. System reporting is for the cockpit team and the experts, and then the business reporting is really for that cockpit team to evaluate, are we doing the right strategy, yes or no? That's reporting. Of course, you need to have a right optimization rhythm. That's all about research, test and learn, set up, optimize, and of course, repeat. It's a continuous loop. And that's also needs to be done on different levels. We need optimization driven by a test and learn framework. You have, of course, setup and optimizations. What should be optimized in our active campaigns? But what a lot of people forget is the test and learn phase. How we like to operate is in 70-20-10 kind of way. So 70% of our budget is invested in what we know works, 20% more in innovations, and 10% in outside of the box ideas. But it's really important to keep optimizing those innovations, trying new things, testing new creatives, new channels, because those can also tell you, is our strategy working? Do we need to tell our story in a different way? It's not only about, are we receiving enough impressions and clicks? And then, of course, research and analysis, also very important. Are we making the right choices? That can be about competitor analysis, that can be about audience research, market research, brand studies, everything else. So again, here we need different levels of optimizations to start doing the right thing. Now, to amplify that whole system, as I said, you need data and AI. If you look at data, data is your enabler of growth across teams and platforms. Data, every team, every department has a lot of data. You have technology team, you have marketing team, strategy team, creative team. They have data, they use AI, and we need to make sure that is shared across the board, across all of those teams, that they work together. And it's about data discovery, data and insights, it's about tracking, it's about data activation. So data really is that enabler for growth across teams and platforms. To give you an example of what data can do, data can also be an enabler of your competitive advantage. And we can do a lot of analysis on market share, campaign intensity, ad efficiency, trend analysis, and so on. And the screenshots are maybe a bit small to see, but what you can do with data is also analyze what are your efforts in terms of media compared to your customers. You can scrape ad libraries, and based on that scraping, you can build dashboards to see, are we investing more in for instance, Meta than our competitors in terms of revenue or in terms of ad volume. Then in general, where's the market investing the most? Is it more in video or is it more in static images? That can give you a lot of insights on what you are doing versus your competitors to spot opportunities. So really leveraging that data, not only to drive performance, but to create competitive advantage, is a really important part that a lot of businesses forget because they tend to think that it's a lot of work. But with the right frameworks in place, you can start doing this. I also talked about AI. AI is a hot topic, of course, and we can't ignore it. But what I want to discuss with you today also is the way you should treat AI, certainly within such a system. And the first message that I wanted to give you was that AI is not a strategy. A lot of people are asking questions. We now have AI. We need to rethink our strategy. And that's not the right question. AI isn't a strategy, because if you treat AI as a strategy, you place it in a role that it can't fulfill. For AI to work, you need a good system, you need a good basis, because if you start using AI on a weak system, it just starts failing more and failing faster, and it decreases your performance. If you start AI leveraging it on a good system, it increases your performance. So AI is not a strategy. AI is a multiplier of your performance. So you need a strong system, and if you then release AI based on a strong system, you start increasing your performance. So it's about making sharper decisions, activating buyers. It's about optimization. It's about pattern recognition, and so on and so on. So AI is a connected multi-agent system, and it's really the multiplier of your build, nudge, and connect. One thing I also wanted to discuss was that we often see a big gap between the hype on AI and the reality of AI. The hype is often, like I said, AI's strategy, but it's also a lot of questions like, Google Ads has AI, what are we going to do with it? But that's difficult because a lot of platforms like Google and Meta, they have AI integrated into their own systems, but it's kind of a black box. It's not something we can leverage really or control. What we can do, of course, is by, for instance, integrating more precise ad tracking to make sure that the AI's algorithm uses the right info. That's what we can do. But we can't control AI integrated into those tools. The reality is that we need to make sure that AI is integrated into our process, into other kind of aspects that can influence our media system. For instance, if we can connect AI to our creative part, we can maybe do more personalization to make our media work better. If we can connect the results of our campaigns with the results for our business, and we can make sure that AI analyzes it better, we can draw better conclusions. So there's a lot of difference between what a lot of people are asking us instead of what the reality is of what AI can do. So if we do everything like this, then you really come to one growth engine. And that one growth engine is one system, one story. And it's really also about blending, a blending strategy, blending creativity, media, tech, and data. Because if we make them work as one, then you really have one growth engine and one brand and performance system. Now, before we close, I wanted to tackle a few questions that we sometimes get with these. First of all, this system thinking, it's something kind of big. It's difficult to comprehend sometimes where do we start, because if you want to do everything, that's really a lot of work. But you need to think for yourself, how can I start in a small way? For instance, can I just at first start with a system around the search landscape and really focus on SEO, SEA, and GEO, maybe later adding social search. So start creating a smaller system around certain touch points. If that starts working well, start thinking about those other touch points. But you can always start small. You don't have to necessarily do everything all at once. Some questions we also get are campaigns dead? As I said before, it's not a break with campaigns, but it's maturity. The old way of working isn't sufficient anymore. We need another way of working and thinking. Now the system comes first and the campaigns follow. Question we also get is, I don't have a lot of budget for big brand campaigns. And I want to clarify that again, because the word brand has a lot of different meanings for different people. But brand in this case doesn't only go about brand campaigns. It's about experience the customer has on every single touch point, and it needs to be consistent and always on. So if you don't have a lot of budget for brand campaigns, make sure that across your touch points, the brand experience is right. And that means understanding your audience, translating that in the right messaging, in the right formats. Where do I start with AI is often also a question. We talked a bit about AI at the end. What I always say is start mapping out your process and determine where the most important and demanding steps are, because these are the parts that you should focus your AI efforts on. Do you have difficulty with analyzing stuff? Start there. Do you have difficulties with reporting? Start integrating AI in reporting. Don't just throw AI everywhere, but start doing it where you need it the most. And then the final question that I wanted to tackle with you was, does a system need a lot more creatives? No, it doesn't need more creatives, but more modular. You just need one brand ID and break that down into assets that you can adapt across touch points. So actually, there is less waste and more consistency in your system than if you start designing campaigns where you create a lot of different assets for a lot of different phases and so on and so on. All right, that was it for me. Of course, still open for questions if there are any. If you want to know more, there is a white paper about this with a lot more details. And also there is a webinar coming the 25th of June called From Reach to Influence. And it focuses a bit more on this vision, but more specifically on the part where media and brand must be one system. Now I just gave you the full overview of system thinking and the mind shift we have to take, but we also want to focus with you more on the cooperation between media and brand, because we really believe it's important. So feel free, if there's still any questions, to drop them in the chat. I have one question here still that I will answer. So it's a question from Rachel. What would you advise a one-person team with a limited budget? Where should I focus my attention on? I think mainly brand building. What are your ideas? The answer for me, it depends also on what your goal is. If your goal is brand building, then yes, start with thinking about what are the interactions my customer have with me, and start making sure that those interactions are a nice experience and on brand. If your focus is more on performance, start designing a smaller system that focuses more on the in-market audience, being, like I said, SEO, SEA, and geo. All right. If there's no other questions, we can wrap it up here. Thanks for joining. I hope you found it interesting. There's my email and phone number if you have more questions. One more question. The checklist and template to build such a system is something we are working on. Will be more clear in the next webinar, but I think you will also have a lot of answers in the white paper to start thinking about it. But feel free to reach out if you want to know more. We'll share the case studies also with you in the next webinar. We're still working on those, since this is also quite new, but good question. All right. Thanks again all for joining.